equilibrium? Equilibrium is where supply and demand get together on the same graph. And so while today is all about equilibrium and what that looks like, from here on out, I just refer to equilibrium as when supply and demand meet. And so that's why the notes are kind of called Introduction to Supply and Demand. So with that, I'm going to get started. Market equilibrium is the fancy name that says when a quantity demanded and quantity supplied meet at a particular price. So on this table here, you'll see that they meet at $4.50 in price, so $4.50, but 50 are supplied and 50 are demanded. So we can say this is toothbrushes. So at $4.50, 50 toothbrushes are demanded and 50 toothbrushes are supplied. That means suppliers are selling everything they have and consumers are getting everything they want. If you move in either direction, like at $1.50, 70 people want toothbrushes, but only 10 are being supplied, and vice versa. At $9, suppliers are willing to sell 110 toothbrushes, but people are only willing to buy 20. And toothbrushes is probably not the best example because everybody wants a toothbrush because everybody wants to brush their teeth. But you get the idea of supply and demand meeting wants and needs. Equilibrium price is that price. So while market equilibrium is this whole line of $4.50 with 50 supplied and 50 demanded, equilibrium price is just that $4.50. This is what equilibrium looks like. So we've talked about our supply to the sky, we've talked about our demand, and then here on out, every graph you make needs to start just like this. So you've got P for price at the top. PE1 is price equilibrium 1. And then going down the black lines, you'll see QE1, that's quantity equilibrium 1, and then Q for quantity. We've got our demand line, we've labeled it D1. We've got our supply line, we have labeled it S1. And then we have E1, which is equilibrium 1. This is very important to note that you are going to have to start labeling this E1, QE1, PE1, and you're going to have to draw those little dotted lines. And so in my little graphing that I do today, it'll kind of help you understand where we're going with that. So what does all of this mean? Kind of just went through that. Make sure you number 2. So we've been doing the 1s and the 2s, and you just need to keep that up. So a shortage is when there is more quantity demanded than quantity supplied. And on a graph, it looks like this. And I know at first you're like, whoa, that's a lot. So look at it. You've got your P, you've got your Q, you've got your D1 and your S1, and you can see where equilibrium is. But because there's a shortage, you come down to this line below equilibrium, and you can see the quantity demanded. So where the purple dot meets the red line, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity being supplied, or where the purple dot meets the blue dot. A surplus is when there's more quantity supplied than quantity demanded. So a shortage right now would be toilet paper, whereas a surplus right now could be gasoline, or it could be work clothes. All right, so look at your surplus. If you come down to the quantity axis, you can see quantity supplied, where the purple dot meets the blue line, is greater than where quantity demanded, or the purple dot meets the red line at this line up here at the top. A shortage is also known sometimes as a price ceiling, meaning that, and I know some of you are like this, wait, what? A price ceiling, that black line represents where the price cannot go above. So price ceiling is saying the price has to stay down here below equilibrium. So even though equilibrium, quantity and supply, or quantity and price would be so much higher, the federal government or some sort of other restriction would require the price ceiling to be lower than equilibrium. Price floor is then what we also call a surplus, meaning that equilibrium's below it and the price is above it. So price floor is, for example, minimum wage, meaning that equilibrium quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and price would all say that wages should be much lower. But the federal government, state government, local government has come in and said, no, 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 no. You're going to start wages at this price, even though equilibrium's underneath it. So you could say the price floor right there is $7.25, whereas maybe equilibrium would actually be $4.25. So we want that black line for minimum wage, or you all want that black line for minimum wage because that's what you're getting paid, or hopefully more. So then how do we use equilibrium? Equilibrium is where the prices meet. So one of the ways that we use it is competitive pricing. So producers are trying to sell products at lower prices while still making a profit. And so you got to think about like the buy two, get one free, buy 10 at $10. What advertisements, and we'll come to that in the micro section of the class, but what advertisements are producers using to get consumers to buy their goods so that the producer can still make a profit? So 4 characteristics of this price system. The first one is that it's neutral. So producers and consumers still get to make the choice and they still get to have a say in that equilibrium. It's market driven, so the government does not determine what equilibrium is. The consumers and producers determine what equilibrium is. It's flexible. So as market conditions change, so do prices. Right now, we don't want that flexibility because there is that toilet paper, paper towel, napkin shortage. We don't want the flexibility of prices going up on those products because there is a shortage. So that's when the government can step in and say no price gouging, right? You can't raise the prices because you know there's a limited supply of these goods. And then the last type of the price system is that it is efficient. If you can hear noise coming in through my headphones, I am outside recording today, and somebody just started mowing their grass. All right, prices and producers. Producers have incentives, prices and producers. There are incentives. So why are people buying and why they act a certain way? And then producers are the people who provide either the goods and services or the motivation. A rising prices is when producers will enter the market. So now we might see more producers of toilet paper, more producers of masks, more producers of gowns. Because there's a shortage, they want to help that shortage, but they also want to make money. A falling price is when producers leave the market. So once this crisis is over, people are going to say, you know what? I'm going to go back to making whatever it was I made before, the toilet paper or the masks or the gown. Consumers and prices. So consumers take the time to realize surpluses are a good time to buy a good or service, mostly because it's cheaper then. So now might be a good time to go buy gas and save it in storage containers, which actually sounds like a horrible idea, but hey, it might be a good time. Whereas some people might not be interested in buying toilet paper or paper towels or napkins right now because the prices are a little bit high or because there is a shortage of it. So for the most part, though, consumers are going to buy normal goods at the best possible price. So people are still buying food, they're still buying groceries, and they're going to keep buying what they eat and what they like to eat because it's staying relatively the same price. And then the last slide today is all about the black market. I always throw this in just for a little bit of fun, but the black market is just the illegal buying or selling without price controls or rationing or any of that. So the black market, you can think of drugs, you can think of organs. The black market still works at equilibrium, still works as supply and demand. There's still consumers and producers. No matter which way you do it, honestly, the black market works as almost a pure market because it's breaking so many laws and regulations. And then the last one was, or prohibition, it's just an example of a black market. So what went on during prohibition with the bootlegging and the speakeasies and the corruption is a great example of a black market. So this is equilibrium. This is probably my favorite lesson of the whole year. I love supply and demand. I love putting them together, and I love shifting them. all of the factors still come into play. So we're still taking what we learned in demand with merit, and we're still taking in what we learned with supply and toner, but everything's coming into play. And you'll see that in the graphs that I draw in a second. All right, today, guys, we're going to talk about equilibrium, and I'm going to start with what your graph should always look like, and then I'm going to talk about what it looks like to increase or decrease one or the other. So either increase supply or increase demand. So this video is going to be a little bit lengthy, but you need to go ahead and start your graph with your P's and Q's. So P, Q. And then we did blue for supply. So we're going to draw our S1. Then we did red for demand. So we're going to draw that. We're going to label it D1. And then we are going to label equilibrium. So where supply meets demand is known as equilibrium. So we're going to label it E1. Then we're going to follow equilibrium to see where it meets the quantity axis. We're going to call it quantity equilibrium 1. Then we're going to follow equilibrium to the price axis, and we're going to call it price equilibrium 1. And so here's equilibrium. Your graphs always need to look this nice. All right. Start here. Every time we do a problem from here on out, before you even read the problem or think of the scenarios, start here in equilibrium. So now we have equilibrium. And we are going to increase demand. So I'm going to find a color for you guys. Okay. I'm going to increase demand. If you remember what I said the last few days, is an increase is always a shift to the right. So I'm going to look at demand, I'm going to look at the quantity axis, and I know I'm headed this direction. So I'm going to draw my arrows, showing a shift to the right. I'm going to label it now as D2. I'm going to come back and find a lighter purple. I'm going to label my new equilibrium E2. I'm going to follow the dotted lines so it didn't go as far red as I wanted it to. Then I'm going to call it quantity equilibrium 2. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call it price equilibrium 2. And so when there is an increase in demand, there is an increase in quantity and an increase in price. And so this is what an increase in demand looks like. Okay, so this is your increase in demand. Great. I'm going to be done with this drawing. We're going to go to page 2. We're going to do a new drawing. All right, so where do I start? I start with my P's and Q's. So I'm going to draw price and quantity. Here's quantity, here's price. Then I'm going to draw my supply line, label it S1. Draw my demand line, label it D1. Find E1. Find quantity equilibrium 1. Find price equilibrium 1. Great. I have drawn my equilibrium. Remember, this is where we're always starting. Because we did increase in demand, this one's going to be increase in supply. Just like we did with demand, we are going to shift to the right. So we're looking at our quantity equilibrium axis down here. We're shifting to the right, so I'm going to draw my arrows showing a shift to the right. And then I'm going to shift supply to the right. I'm going to label it S2. I'm going to find a purple crayon. I'm going to name it E2. I'm going to name this one quantity equilibrium 2. I'm going to label this one price equilibrium 2. So When there is an increase in supply, there is a decrease in quantity. When there is an increase in supply, there is an increase in quantity, but a decrease in price. So just as a reminder, this is an increase in supply. So when there is an increase in supply, there is an increase in quantity, but a decrease in price. And this is it for increasing either just supply or just demand. This is what your final graphs should look like. All right, so now we're going to move into decreases in either just supply or just demand. Sorry if that's a little wacky. Okay, so starting with your equilibrium, first draw your axis and label it Q, label it P. Then we're going to draw supply, label it S1. We're going to draw demand, label it D1. And then we are going to label our equilibrium points. So this is E1. Follow it down to the axis. You have QE1. And then follow it, to the price axis. Make sure you try to be as consistent as you can. So that's BE1, and this is QE1 down here. So this is equilibrium. So now we're going to shift demand. And we're going to cause a decrease in demand. So all decreases always need to be a shift to the left. So we're going to the left of what's on quantity. And so shifting demand to the left, I'm going to change my color so it's easier to see. We're going to draw our arrows showing a shift to the left. We're going to draw our new demand line, and then we're going to go through and label our new equilibriums. So where S1 meets D2, we're going to call it E2. We're going to follow this dotted line, call it QE2, and then we're going to follow this over here, and we have price equilibrium 2. So this is a decrease in demand. And a decrease in demand means that quantity decreases, price decreases. And you can see that by seeing the difference in the shift. And so here is your decrease in demand, decrease in demand. The next one we're going to do is a decrease in supply. So I'm going to erase everything very quickly. While I'm doing that, you're going to set up your graph if you are following along. And so we'll start with our black, and we'll draw our price and quantity, labeling everything. We'll come back, we'll find our color for supply, and label it S1. We'll find our color for demand, labeling it D1. And then we'll find our colors for equilibrium, labeling it E1, bringing it down to the axis, calling it quantity equilibrium 1, bringing it over to this axis, calling it price equilibrium 1. And then just like we did with demand, we're going to shift supply. We're causing a decrease in supply, which means it is a shift to the left. Because it's a decrease, it is always going to be a shift to the left. So I'm going to draw my arrows to the left of supply 1. I'm going to draw my new line and label it S2. Then I'm going to change my color and label my new equilibrium points. So where D1 and S2 meet, I'm going to label it E2. I'm going to bring it down to the quantity axis and call it quantity equilibrium 2. Bring it over to the price axis and call it price equilibrium 2. And so when there is a decrease in supply, there is a decrease in quantity, but an increase in price. And so this is a decrease in supply. Again, it's a decrease in supply, which is a decrease in quantity, but an increase in price. And you can see that over here on the axis. And that is your decreases. And this is only shifting demand or only shifting supply. This next video is going to be about a price ceiling. And I'm writing so high up you can't even see what I'm writing. So price ceiling. Spelling on that one. All right, so starting with a price ceiling, you start with what you do for every other graph, which is a price and a quantity label. You get rid of the old numbers. All right, and then we're going to start in equilibrium. So starting with my blue crayon or blue color, I'm going to label S1, and then bringing in my red color, I'm going to label D1, and then using my purple color, I'm going to label E1. So I'm going to find equilibrium 1, I'm going to find quantity equilibrium 1, and then I'm going to find price equilibrium 1. All right, but now I'm going to draw a price ceiling. What you need to understand with price ceiling, it is always underneath equilibrium. It is never above equilibrium, even though it's a ceiling. It is, that's just the way economics works. Sometimes it doesn't make sense until you draw it out. So drawing a price ceiling, I'm drawing a straight line underneath equilibrium. So here is my price ceiling. I don't know how to spell ceiling, so that's my best guess. All right, why is it a price ceiling? Because if I label where my price ceiling meets my supply line, which is this green dot, or where this green dot right here, or where my demand line meets the price ceiling, which is right there, I'll see if I draw down to the quantity axis, because my price ceiling, it's the same no matter what supply or demand. If I draw down to my quantity axis, you'll see where I labeled quantity demanded and quantity supplied. My quantity demanded is greater than my quantity supplied, which means there is a shortage. So there's a shortage, a price ceiling typically then would be something like toilet paper, for instance. And so more is being demanded than supplied. And so suppliers might react by raising the price and coming to equilibrium. But for whatever reason, the government has said that equilibrium is too high of a price for our consumers. And so you must stay down here at this price. So maybe it's $2 per box instead of $5 per box. So the consumers cannot meet at $5, says the government. And so you must do it at $2, which means we're always going to be demanding more toilet paper than is available. And that is your price ceiling. This last graph of the day is going to be a price floor. And so we're going to start with our P and our Q. So we're going to label P, and then we are going to label Q. Then I'm going to draw my supply line, label it S1, draw my demand, and label it D1. Find my equilibrium, label it E1. Find quantity equilibrium 1. Find price equilibrium 1. So now I've created my equilibrium and I'm drawing a price floor. Price floors are always going to be above equilibrium. So drawing my price floor, a straight line above equilibrium. I'm going to label it price floor. And then I'm going to find where the green line meets supply 1 and where the green line meets demand 1. And I'm going to drag the, wow, just blank. So quantity supplied is here, and then quantity demanded is there. There should be no 1 here. So here you can see that quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. So quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. This is also known as a surplus. So a lot of times this will be minimum wage. And so the government has set a price floor and saying minimum wage is here. But how many of you want to actually work at minimum wage? You guys would be here, the ones willing to work at minimum wage. Minimum wage jobs, though, being supplied are here. So not as many people want jobs that pay minimum wage. They want to be paid more than minimum wage. So the demand for a minimum wage job is less than the minimum wage jobs being supplied. Otherwise saying the quantity demanded, I'm sorry, let me start that over. Otherwise saying the quantity supplied of minimum wage jobs is greater than the quantity being demanded for minimum wage jobs. And so again, this is your price floor, and it is always going to be above equilibrium.